Over the past 25 years, the continent of Africa has made one of the most dramatic shifts in world history, strategically moving away from the United States and instead building a future with China. Just look at this chart from the Asia Society, which tracks the global public opinion about China. Countries in blue have a negative opinion about China, while countries in red have a positive opinion. But now, specifically focus on the continent of Africa and observe how it becomes more red over time. At the end of 2024, the vast majority of African nations have a remarkably positive opinion about China. But the main takeaway from this report is astounding. China is not simply making inroads in Africa by cultivating elites. It is genuinely popular. Positive views of China among citizens in sub-Saharan Africa have outweighed negative views by a factor of about 3 to 1 across nearly 300 surveys in the region. And this is important because Africa will be the next geopolitical hotspot between the United States and China. Africa is home to the largest source of rare earth minerals, which are the foundation of the 21st century. Every single cutting-edge technology you hear about, from AI, electric vehicles, drones, and advanced machinery to renewable energy and fusion reactors, depends on a steady, secure supply of these critical materials. And because of that, the great powers of the world are now locked in an all-out battle to control the future of their supply chains. The fight is playing out across key geopolitical flashpoints, from Ukraine to Greenland, but nowhere is this battle more intense than on the resource-rich continent of Africa. But for decades, the US government and European allies have done very little to develop the continent. The US government has always looked at Africa as a problem to be solved, while China's government has taken the opposite approach, and instead always looked at Africa as a continent of opportunity. The Chinese belief in Africa has changed an entire generation of young Africans who now look at China much more positively and objectively than their Western counterparts. And honestly, it makes complete sense, because the US government's real intentions in Africa have never been about helping African people. US government agencies like USAID have spent decades destabilizing and overthrowing African governments, but the truth has finally been exposed. Just listen to this interview with the former African Union ambassador to the United States, who reveals the truth about US government agencies in Africa.
We need to understand the real reason why USAID is in Africa. And not just USAID, but other NGOs. When you look at it on paper, it all looks really good, but they're actually wolf in sheep's clothing. They are using that open access sounding humanitarian to constantly destabilize governments. I can tell you right now, the majority of African leaders, and not just African leaders, but leaders in the developing world, are celebrating the exit of USAID.
This clip is remarkable because for the first time in history, the world is finally waking up to the reality of the US government's actions in Africa. While China is building schools, hospitals, roads, and airports through Africa, the US has provided very little tangible benefits for African people.
Show me one country that USAID was in and education improved. Show me what country where USAID was in and healthcare improved. The American taxpayer needs to know the billions of dollars that are being given to USAID, a fraction is making it to the people.
Once again, this is a remarkable interview because for the majority of Americans, this is the first time they are learning the truth about the US government's efforts in Africa. The US government sends billions in US taxpayer money to Africa, but it doesn't help the people. Instead, it's used to overthrow governments and keep African countries oppressed and provide little to no tangible solutions for the future. Today, Africans are turning away from the Western-led model and moving closer to BRICS and the Global South's growing economic alliance. China's Belt and Road Initiative is offering Africa a historic alternative, an independent path to development that has never existed before. And in today's video, we're breaking down the exact reasons why China is winning big in Africa, where exactly the US government went wrong, and what it means for the future of our world. But first, videos like this wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. And let me tell you about Nomad Capitalist, which ties directly into the geopolitical trends I discuss on this channel. Last September, I flew to Malaysia and met their founder, Andrew Henderson, at the 2024 Nomad Capitalist Live event in Kuala Lumpur. And it was like hearing a real-life case study of what I discuss on this channel. Andrew started as an entrepreneur, frustrated by huge tax bills, even when he was operating globally. But instead of accepting the status quo, he built a framework for legally reducing taxes, gaining second citizenships, and investing in countries that actually want your business. He turned that experience into Nomad Capitalist, a company that helps you create a customized global plan, no matter where you start from. They understand that if you're following geopolitical trends, like the ones I cover here, then you already know you need a plan B, a way to protect your wealth if one jurisdiction changes its policies overnight. I mean, just look at what has happened to the United States since Donald Trump has taken office. If you're tired of feeling stuck or worried about what your home country might do next, reach out to Nomad Capitalist and let them help you prepare for the unpredictable world we live in. Simply visit nomadcapitalist.com. I'll drop the link down in the description below. Okay, so the battle for Africa's critical minerals is heating up, but it's clear that China remains firmly in control. Just look at this South China Morning Post article, which explains things very bluntly. Beijing has spent years and billions investing in Africa's mining sector, and it is now paying off in a big way. With the global shift towards renewable energy, demand for critical minerals is skyrocketing, fueling intense competition among the world's industrial powerhouses. But China, with its head start and clear strategic vision, isn't going to lose its lead anytime soon. For decades, the West were perfectly content with China dominating the rare earth mineral supply chain. This was because mining and refining these resources is an environmentally hazardous, chemically intensive process. As a result, Westerners were happy to outsource this process and its pollution. But now that these resources are becoming critically important, they are scrambling to create supply chains from scratch. And nowhere is this battle being waged more than over Congolese cobalt, where China is already massively ahead. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DRC, is by far the world's biggest source of cobalt, a mineral needed for making the batteries used in phones and electric vehicles. The DRC accounts for nearly 70% of global production, and it is also a key source of copper and a dozen other critical materials and rare earth minerals. China recognized this reality many years ago and moved aggressively to secure its position, investing billions into the DRC's mining sector as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Among the most significant projects is a $7 billion resource for infrastructure deal led by Chinese firm Sinohydro and China Railway Engineering Corporation. Under this agreement, China is building roads, power grids, hydroelectric dams, and industrial hubs, critical infrastructure that will help the DRC's long-term economic development. In return, these Chinese companies are repaid in minerals or the income that they generate. But what's most incredible about this story is that less than a decade ago, some of America's largest mining companies, like Freeport, McMoran, owned the rights to this exact mine. But incredibly, it sold its stake to China for $2.65 billion in 2016. 4 years later, the same American company sold another DRC mine to China for $550 million. And just like that, China's CMOC became the world's largest producer of cobalt, securing China's position of strength in the continent, but also securing China's control over one of the most important precious metals for renewable energies. But despite being years behind, Washington refuses to admit defeat. So what exactly is Washington offering as an alternative to China's infrastructure and development investments? Well, just last week, the Financial Times reported that the US has engaged in exploratory talks with the DRC and is reportedly offering DRC military support in exchange for access to critical minerals. In practical terms, it likely means little more than another American military base, offering zero tangible benefits to the local economy. This is the same playbook that Washington has used for decades. No roads, no industrial development, no energy investments, just military influence, intelligence operations, and ensuring that a small elite remains loyal to U.S. interests by any means necessary. To further show the United States' lack of any intent of nation building, the U.S. is now openly encouraging its corporations to engage in bribery to secure access to the DRC's resources. Trump halted enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, rolling back anti-corruption measures to make it easier for U.S. companies to operate in Africa. The DRC is already ranked as one of the worst countries in the world for transparency, and this move makes Washington's strategy crystal clear. This isn't development. This isn't a partnership. This is economic exploitation in its rawest form. But even with all of Washington's pressure, the reality is clear. China already dominates the DRC's mineral sector, and the U.S. is hopelessly behind. As Joseph Sehunda, a legal scholar at one of the DRC's top universities, emphasized, China has a virtual monopoly on copper and cobalt production. Pressure on the Congolese government, or in the worst case, changing it, won't be enough, given that the Congolese public opinion considers the U.S. to be the one pulling the strings in all the murderous wars the DRC has experienced since 1996. And that's the simple truth that Washington refuses to face. The US isn't seen as a development partner. It's seen as the architect of decades of war and instability in the region. Meanwhile, China is building roads, ports, and power plants. The choice for the DRC couldn't be clearer. But this story goes well beyond the DRC. As you move around the continent, the situation for the US doesn't look better. Donald Trump's recent decision to cut off US aid to South Africa over its new land reform law may prove to be a geopolitical blunder, further alienating Washington from the global south. Tensions between the US and its largest trading partner in Africa escalated after South Africa passed a land expropriation law in January, which was an attempt to address the racial inequalities left behind by apartheid. Under the old system, land was seized from Black South Africans and redistributed to the white population. Today, the country's white minority, which makes up around 7% of the population, own around 70% of the private farmland, and on average, earn 3 times as much as Black South Africans. But on February 7th, Trump issued an executive order halting all US aid to South Africa, accusing the country's Black majority government of being anti-American and siding with bad actors on the world stage. But this move isn't just about land reform. South Africa's refusal to condemn Russia over Ukraine, its genocidal case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, and the growing influence of Elon Musk have all fueled tensions. Musk, a South African-born billionaire, almost certainly played a large role in shaping the president's opinion on the matter, frequently using X to weigh in against the reforms. The impact of Trump's decision will be immediate and severe. South Africa's health sector, particularly its HIV treatment programs, are heavily reliant on over $440 million from US aid just last year, and it will suffer the most. With over 8 million South Africans living with HIV, the loss of the funding could have devastating consequences. But beyond the humanitarian cost, the geopolitical implications are just as significant. Before this recent spat, South Africa, like many nations, was looking to play both sides and maintain good relationships with both China and the United States. But with Washington's withdrawal of support and engagement in what South Africa calls megaphone diplomacy and its bullying, this forces South Africa's hand firmly to its BRICS partner and ally, China. You see, the Belt and Road Initiative has already outpaced the United States in economic influence on the continent. And now, with Trump's treatment of South Africa, it could accelerate this shift of other global South nations who are increasingly favor China's win-win diplomacy over Washington's hardcore approach. With no aid, no trade preferences, and little incentive to engage, South Africa may simply sit out the Trump years and wait for a more pragmatic administration to restore ties. In the meantime, Washington risks losing even more ground in Africa's battle for influence, while China quietly consolidates its position. The battle over Africa's rare earth minerals is more than a competition for resources. It's a fight over the continent's economic future and its place in the emerging world order. China has already established itself as the dominant force. Meanwhile, the United States, after years of neglect, is now scrambling to regain influence because its strategy remains rooted in military actions, coercion, and outdated Cold War tactics. For African nations, the choice is becoming clear by the day. China offers roads, ports, energy independence, and industrialization, real pathways to economic sovereignty, while the US, on the other hand, brings military bases, political interference, and the same exploitative extraction model that has kept Africa at the bottom of the global value chain for many decades. The era of Western dominance over Africa's resources is coming to an end, and the question now is not whether China will maintain its lead, but whether the US will accept reality and adapt or continue to double down on a strategy that has already failed. Everyone, I want to thank you for making it to this point of the video. And as always, I want to thank our sponsor, Nomad Capitalist, who specializes in understanding these complex geopolitical issues that we talk about on this YouTube channel. Once again, if you're interested in learning more about Nomad Capitalist, simply click the link down below. And as always, I want to thank you for your incredible support. Click here to watch our next video, and I can't wait to see you in our next video soon.